tests that could help the doctor take care of you. You know, if they look at a BUN and creatinine, maybe if they're elevated, you either could be dehydrated or have renal failure. If you look at liver function tests, maybe there's something wrong with your liver. So it's just a general, a good look at the patients to see if there are any clues that could help them.
And as far as the blood testing results are concerned, how does that assist either a doctor or a clinician in treatment and diagnosis?
Basically, what I just said. If there's nothing, if the results are normal, that sometimes helps too. Rules things out if they're normal. If they do a CBC and look at the hemoglobin and it's low and patient's anemic, maybe the patient might need a transfusion. So there are many different case scenarios where the results can help the provider, the clinician.
Now, with reference to alcohol, does the Good Samaritan Medical Center, do they also test alcohol within the blood?
Yes, we do.
And why would that assist medical treatment and diagnosis?
I think if a physician is wanting to know if somebody's been drinking or has alcohol on board, or maybe not, maybe that patient has ingested maybe drugs of abuse, so they'll test for alcohol to see, one, if it's positive, and if it is, then it helps confirm that the patient has been drinking.
Now, are there any policies and protocols at Good Samaritan Medical Center with reference to how blood is taken and how blood is tested?
Yes, we have numerous policies. We have one policy specifically for phlebotomists. Those are laboratory technicians who draw the blood. So we have a policy for them to explain exactly what they need to do. And also in the laboratory, we have numerous policies basically for any tests that we provide, and so we have a policy for alcohol testing as well.
May I approach the witness, Your Honor?
Yes.
Doctor, I'm placing before you two sets of documents. Just ask you to review those generally and look up when you're finished. And do you recognize what those are, sir?
Yes.
And can you explain to the jury what is contained within each of those two sets of documents?
Okay. The first one is a patient preparation for specimen collection. This is the policy that I was mentioning, specifically designed for our phlebotomist to detail the procedure of the blood draw. Basically goes through one of the most important parts of the process is correct patient identification, where we need to correctly identify the patient. We have the patient state his or her first and last name and state it out loud to make sure it matches the patient that we're trying to draw. And then we also match up the bracelet to the medical record number on the patient's bracelet. So one of the most important things is correct patient identification. The rest of this policy goes on and just pretty much details what to do next, including finding the veins, cleaning the site. It has some information on if there are any complications. So it's basically the entire process of the blood draw. The second one is our alcohol policy, which pretty much details in detail what goes on behind the scenes for an alcohol blood test in our hospital.
May I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, Caldwell, proceed to introduce in the minutes the next two exhibits.
No objection. All right, thank you.
Your Honor, for the record, it would be the patient preparation for specimen collection, the next exhibit in line.
All right. Exhibit 35.
And the ETOH policy would be the next exhibit number 37.
Thank you. Exhibit 36.
Excuse me. Thank you. Now, doctor, what types of precautions are in place at Good Samaritan with respect specifically to alcohol testing in the blood? Or I should say taking the blood sample from the patient.
Yes, one of the major things we need to do with taking somebody's blood for alcohol is to obviously not use an alcohol swab. Normally, when you have your blood test, they cleanse the area with a swab that contains alcohol. So in our policy is a specific statement that says, do not use alcohol swab, because potentially when you're drawing the blood, if you suck up some of that residual alcohol, you could cause a false positive. So we have in our policy, and every hospital should have the same policy, where we use a swab that has no alcohol. We call them a moist towelette. That's what we refer them to. Also, in the emergency room, my supervisor pretty much removed probably 95% of all the alcohol swabs. So just in case a phlebotomist forgets to not use an alcohol swab, they are hard to find. We need to keep a few there because we need to use alcohol wipes on certain tests like blood cultures and stuff like that. So,
when were the alcohol swabs removed from the emergency department?
it was before my time.
So fair to say prior to January 29th, 2022?
Correct.
What is a phlebotomist and what do they do?
So a phlebotomist is a healthcare professional who specializes in drawing blood. So they're the ones who are trained, competent, and know what to do when they draw a patient's blood.
What kind of training do phlebotomists receive at Good Samaritan?
We try to hire phlebotomists who have been trained. It's just easier. So they can have a high school background, but if we train on site, they just need to be trained on the proper protocol, proper procedures, and demonstrate competency.
Is there any sort of proficiency testing related to phlebotomists at Good Samaritan?
There's no proficiency testing for phlebotomists, but there's competency assessments. So with phlebotomists or any laboratory technician or even pathologists, there are strict guidelines for competency. We have to always make sure people know what they're doing, and it's a CLIA or a federal government regulation or requirement. So when anybody first starts in a hospital, the requirements are, one, initial training. You can't let anybody come in on their own, without not knowing what they're doing. So we have to document that they have the initial training and they're competent. And then the law says 6 months from that, we do another competency assessment where we look at 6 elements of competency defined by CLIA, and 6 months from that, 1 year from the start date, is another competency, and then after that, it's annual thereafter. And that goes for phlebotomists, and that goes for any laboratory technician.
Doctor, once the blood is drawn by the phlebotomist, what happens then?
So the phlebotomist will draw it at the time. They need to have the specimens labeled in the patient's room, because you don't want the phlebotomist to mislabel. So everything gets labeled at the patient's bedside with an initialed and with the phlebotomist's initial and date and time. That blood test will then be sent to the lab, In this case, the blood was drawn in the emergency room, so it gets packaged into a plastic bag and sent in a pneumatic tube up to the laboratory.
And once it's sent to the laboratory, what happens with the sample from there?
Once we receive it, it's called receiving the specimen. There will be a technician who then goes into the computer, enters the phlebotomist's name from the tube into the computer system, enters the time, and the technologist will look and see what was ordered, and then do the appropriate next step based on what was ordered.
And in a case in which alcohol is one of the items that are ordered, what is the next step as far as the testing goes?
So the next step with alcohol testing, we use a specific tube, so the phlebotomist would know what tube to use. It would be a light green tube that has lithium heparin in it. It's an anticoagulant. We don't want the blood to clot, so that's why we use an anticoagulant. So the first step when testing for alcohol is that the test is designed to be performed on serum or plasma. And to get that, the next step would be to centrifuge the blood. A centrifuge is a machine that spins the blood rapidly. We spin it at around 3,300 RPMs, which is pretty fast, rotations per minute. And the reason why we spin it, because centrifugation will allow it to separate the blood components based on the density. So heavier stuff like the red blood cells will go to the bottom, and the lighter stuff like the watery component of the blood will go to the top, and some of the white cells go into the middle. But for alcohol testing, we are targeting the top part of the blood component, which would be plasma.
And then once it goes through the centrifuge process, what happens then?
So once it's centrifuged, we have the separation of the blood components. We have the plasma ready to be tested, so that technologist will walk the specimen over. It's probably 10 feet from there, and put it onto our Roche Cobas machine. That's our machine that performs our chemistries as well as alcohol testing. It goes onto a machine. All the testing is basically inside of a black box, and the label present on the blood tube will dictate what the Roche machine will test. So based on the barcode label, once it's on our machine, it knows what test to do, and it will perform an alcohol test.
And Doctor, for our stenographer, do you know how to spell that Roche Cobas machine that you were just referencing?
Oh, R-O-C-H-E, Roche, and Cobas, C-O-B-A-S.
Thank you, sir. May I approach, Ron?
Yes.
Doctor, showing you another series of documents. Again, if you could just look at that and look up when you're finished. Do you recognize those records, sir?
Yes.
And what do you recognize those to be?
These are the medical records of Karen Reed.
And, sir, is there an indication within those records as far as the date of treatment for Ms. Reed?
Yes, there's a bunch of dates in here.
As far as the treatment is concerned, sir?
Yes.
And
Yep,
what is the date of treatment?
1/9/22.
Sorry, is that 29/22?
That's what it says on this. Admit date, it says 1/29/22.
Thank you, sir. That's fine. Doctor, if I could direct your attention further into the document to a previously tabbed portion, do you see any indication in there as far as a result for alcohol testing?
Yes, I do.
And with respect to that result, have you reviewed these records prior to today?
Yes, I did.
And if you could, explain to the jury sort of the timeline from this blood sample as far as, let's start with first when it was ordered.
So when it was ordered, it was 9:03 in the morning.
And when was
That
it
day.
taken, sir?
The blood test was taken 5 minutes later, so 9:08.
And then what happened, or what is the next time that something of any significance happened with it?
5 minutes from that, 9:13, we received it, and 9:53 in the morning, the result was entered into the computer. So it was ordered at 9:03, and I believe it was 9:53 the results were in the computer.
And may I approach again, Your Honor?
Yes.
I'm welcome to seek to introduce and admit as the next exhibit.
Any objection, Ms. Little?
Objection.
All right, thank you.
Exhibit 37.
Your Honor, may I return to the document?
Yes.
And Doctor, what was the result of the testing for alcohol in the defendant's blood when it was taken shortly after 9 a.m. on January 29th?
93 milligrams per deciliter.
Thank you, sir. Nothing further, Your Honor.
Okay. Ms. Little?
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Dr. Fowler.
Oh, good afternoon.
The Good Samaritan lab is a clinical lab, not a forensic lab. Is that right?
Correct.
And hospitals are not in the legal business of calculating an individual's blood alcohol concentration. Is that right?
I would say 99.9% of the time we are not in the legal business. We are testing alcohol for the diagnosis of alcohol intoxication. But occasionally a case may come, very rare, to a hospital, and it ends up being a legal case. It's not common, I think uncommon.
And you'd agree that there are differences between screening tests that are conducted at hospitals and forensic tests that are conducted by law enforcement, right?
Yes,
The purpose of testing in a clinical setting is to assist in the diagnosis and treatment of a patient, right?
correct.
And physicians need to analyze blood quickly. They need to get the results so they can see what's in a patient's system and then effectively and efficiently treat that patient, right?
Correct.
Whereas in a forensic setting, tests for blood alcohol concentration are designed to produce results that are reliable and credible for use in court. Correct?
Correct.
You testified earlier today that your lab is accredited by CAP, which is the College of American Pathologists. Do you recall that testimony?
Yes, I do.
But CAP is a clinical laboratory accreditation, not a forensic accreditation, right?
We don't have the forensic accreditation for Good Samaritan.
In fact, Good Samaritan has never been investigated or accredited by any forensic accreditation team to ensure that you perform all of your tests with the integrity necessary to support results in court, right?
we've never been, we've never had the forensic accreditation, but we have very good quality lab results, which I could go into further.
But you've never been accredited by a forensic accreditation team,
No.
right?
No.
And the lab at Good Samaritan has never been accredited by the ANSI, which is the National Accreditation Board known as ANAB. Are you familiar with that organization?
No.
Are you aware that ANAB is the forensic accreditation body that in the United States that ensures that laboratories' procedures meet the minimum standards necessary to ensure results are reliable and credible for use in court?
Sustained.
Now, the most reliable method of forensic ethanol testing is called headspace gas chromatography, or HSGC. Are you familiar with that process?
Yes.
And HSGC is the method that's used by forensic labs to test for blood alcohol content, right?
Correct.
And that's because forensic tests require the testing of whole blood for the presence of alcohol, right?
Correct.
Can you briefly, just for the jury, describe sort of the difference between a whole blood test and a serum test?
Sure. So whole blood, to put it simply, when you have your blood drawn, you see the fluid coming out, all red. That's whole blood. We don't do anything to it. We don't spin it down. We don't centrifuge it. That is whole blood. That is the specimen of choice for forensic blood ethanol testing. Hospitals, on the other hand, our methodology, which is just as good as the forensic headspace gas chromatography, is based on looking at the serum or the plasma. So we don't, that's what when I explained that we need to centrifuge it, take the liquid portion off the top. So in the hospital, we test it on the serum or the plasma. Now, did you ask me the difference? You want me to go into the difference?
That's enough, Doctor. Thank
Okay,
you. I'll
all right.
ask some additional questions
Okay.
to kind of clarify. And in a forensic lab, they actually require the testing of whole blood, correct?
Correct.
And HSGC directly measures ethanol in the blood.
Correct.
And this method is designed to be accurate and reliable for forensic purposes for use in legal proceedings, correct?
Correct.
But the testing in this case was performed using the hospital's clinical chemistry machine instead of a forensically defensible method like HSGC, right?
Correct.
And that clinical chemistry machine performs what you just testified to, a serum test, right?
Serum or plasma.
Serum or plasma. And hospitals use serum or plasma testing because it's actually quicker and more efficient than HSGC, right?
Yes, it's less labor intensive. It's easy to automate, but at the same time, very, very good and very accurate.
But serum testing does not actually measure alcohol directly. It instead measures the presence of what's called NADH, right? Yes, I'll repeat that. That was my fault. Serum testing does not actually measure alcohol directly. Instead, it measures the presence of NADH. Is that right?
Almost.
Well, NADH is a byproduct of alcohol, right?
Correct. I can go into the testing how methodology that we use to explain it if you want me to.
Well, serum testing measures the presence of NADH, correct?
It measures the rate of change of NADH production, so it doesn't actually look at just NADH, and it measures the rate of production, and I can go into more detail on that. Alcohol testing in the lab is correct.
I'll ask you some additional
Okay,
questions
sure.
about NADH, and we'll
Sure.
get there.
Yeah.
So you can do this now, but let the doctor answer his question fully next question, okay? And the following questions.
Doctor, the higher the NADH in a patient's system, the higher the serum test result, correct?
That may not be correct, no. It's the rate of change of NADH production based on our methodology. I can go into that. So our test system is a little bit different than the forensic testing system, but it's also very good and very accurate, and almost when we compare our methodology to the Headspace, we get the exact same results, and when we compare and with peer laboratory comparisons. But what we do is and I think the jury needs to know this. Maybe some of you might understand the chemistry behind it, but we do. We take the patient's sample, and it's based on, we add, because when there's alcohol in the specimen, we add, actually, in the test system, alcohol dehydrogenase. It's the same enzyme that's in the patient's body. In addition, we add a surplus of NAD to it. NAD is similar to NADH. They get converted back and forth. So when we put it on our test system, it's alcohol dehydrogenase is in there, and what happens is when there's alcohol, it combines with NAD that we add to it. It creates NADH. And then in our machine, there's a spectrophotometer, which can monitor the rate of NADH production over baseline. And we use, there's something that measures, a photometer that measures the NADH production. It looks at light and there's physics, and looks at 340 nanometers. And it's pretty accurate. It will monitor, it will tell you, it will tell the system how much NADH is produced, and that amount is directly proportional to the alcohol in the patient's sample. So it's a very, very accurate test, but there are some limitations that I can go into.
So wait for another question.
Okay.
Next question, Ms. Little.
Yes, so serum testing can be subject to errors, right? And there are limitations.
There are some limitations that I can explain, just like headspace gas chromatography may have some limitations too, but I can go into them.
Next question.
What are some of the limitations of the serum testing?
Okay. So the serum test, as with many tests in the laboratory, different things can interfere with our laboratory tests. And the three most common ones, which are unlikely to affect ethanol testing, is we abbreviated HIL. We want to look at those three things. One is hemolysis, which is H, and the other one is icterus, which is high bilirubin. And the third is L for lipids. High lipids will interfere with alcohol testing or with any testing based on that same methodology. Our machine, the Rose-Kobash machine, and all the machines out in the market today are very sophisticated. If we have elevated levels of any H or I or L, it will flag it and raise the potential for a problem. The next thing on the list is that our alcohol testing is not absolutely specific for ethanol. There are two possible other alcohols that can cross-react. One is propanol and butanol. But then it goes clinical history. Did the patient ingest those two alcohols? And third is there's some unusual hematologic malignancies like Waldenstrom's macroglobulinemia. That can interfere. So it's always have to correlate with the clinical situation. The next one, sometimes there can be patients who make make their own alcohol. So very rarely, some patients may truly have a positive result. That could be from our test or Headspace. They make their own, so we have to rule that out. It's a rare condition. And the next one is one that's in the literature, which is LDH and lactic acid. If a patient has a markedly elevated LDH or lactic acid, those one is an enzyme, and the other one is an acid, that can cause false positives. Now,
If I could stop you there, doctor. I think those were the four that you identified, the four limitations: the lactic acid, the hematite.
Yeah.
If I could just
Go
ask
ahead
you a
and
few
ask your next question.
If I could ask you a few more questions about LDH and lactic acid.
Sure.
You're aware, Dr. Fowler, of the medical literature establishing that the presence of LDH and lactic acid can lead to falsely elevated serum readings, correct?
Correct.
And that's because lactic acid, or LDH, actually forms NADH. Right?
Lactic acid, I'll have to go into a little bit of chemistry. Lactic acid and LDH, lactate dehydrogenase, they both act on each other. And LDH and lactic acid needs NAD plus to break it down. So in theory, when you're testing a serum, a plasma for blood alcohol, if there's extra LDH or high levels of LDH, high levels of lactic acid, you add it to the test system, and then Roche throws in, or Siemens throws in the NAD, it will form NADH. That was first documented, I think, back in the older versions of these ethanol testings back in the 1990s, when they stumbled on, they were looking for biomarkers or reasons in kids with SIDS, little babies, and they found that two of these babies had a positive alcohol. But
Doctor, if I could just ask the next question, if that's okay.
Sorry.
So in other words, NADH, studies have found, can actually be formed by certain biomechanical processes other than the presence of alcohol, right?
Yes.
Are you aware that the National Institute of Health has found that liver diseases, kidney diseases, muscle injury, trauma, and even anemia are some of the health conditions that can lead to a rise in serum LDH levels?
Yes.
Are you aware that Ms. Reed was severely anemic in January of 2022?
Sustained.
Are you aware that the medical literature has also found that patients suffering from multiple sclerosis have a twofold increase in NADH levels as compared to controls?
I'm going to allow that.
I haven't read anything specifically related to the NADH level, but I want to go back to the point where our laboratory, our testing is not based.
Let him finish his answer.
It's not. It's the rate of change of NADH. So if somebody has NADH on board, I believe it's not going to affect the result. It's the rate of change, and it basically, back to the anemia. I haven't read or heard of that.
That was stricken. That was not allowed.
It all goes back to the lactic acid and the LDH. The NADH doesn't matter. So looking at multiple sclerosis patients, they can have elevated LDH and lactic acid, but it's not to the extent that it can interfere with the alcohol levels. There was a study maybe 7-10 years ago.
Your Honor, there's no question pending.
You asked him about a study, if he was aware of the studies.
I asked, and that's a yes or no question. And he's...
All right, Doctor, we're going to hold that there for you and ask the next question.
Doctor, have you reviewed the August 21st, 2013 peer-reviewed article entitled Serum NAD Through Disease Course in Multiple Sclerosis, which was sponsored by the Center of Healthy Brain Aging by the University of New South Wales? Which...
Do that again and slow down, please.
Sure. Doctor, have you reviewed the August 21st, 2013 peer-reviewed article entitled Serum NAD Levels Through Disease Course in Multiple Sclerosis, which was sponsored by the Center for Healthy Brain Aging by the School of Psychiatry at the University of New South Wales in Sydney, Australia, which specifically found that patients suffering from multiple sclerosis have a twofold increase in NADH levels as compared to controls?
Objection.
I'll strike the part of what the article held. Is he aware of the article?
No, I'm not, to be honest, no.
Dr. Fowler, did you consider Ms. Reed's anemia and multiple sclerosis condition when you conducted the alcohol test on January 29, 2022?
No, we don't, no.
And again, serum tests like the ones conducted in this case don't test for ethanol. They only test for NADH, right?
We test for the rate of change of NADH production.
And Doctor, you did a number of other tests on Ms. Reed on January 29, 2022. You tested for additional drugs, not just alcohol, correct?
Correct,
And all of those results were negative.
correct.
Thank you. No further questions.
Okay.
Doctor, are you aware, I know your lab at Good Samaritan did not do this process, but are you aware through your training and experience of any sort of mathematical conversion that can be done from a serum reading in milligram per deciliter to a blood alcohol concentration of whole blood?
I'm going to allow it. The door was open.
Go ahead, sir.
Yes, I am aware, yep.
And please describe what you're aware of with reference to that.
Well, with blood alcohol concentrates goes to, when it's in your blood, it goes more to the watery components of your blood. So when I described the process earlier, whole blood is before we spin it. And when we test the plasma, which is specifically testing the watery component. Now, people have done studies like how much percentage of water is a serum versus whole blood. Basically, to put it simple, there's a higher percentage of water in the serum versus whole blood. So a hospital result will always be a little bit higher than a test on whole blood. It can be, I think the ratio, the conversion factor is anywhere from 1.1 to 1.18. It's always could be 18% or 11% higher in serum versus whole blood. But we don't do it. That's what I read. I will defer that to the experts.
Now, Doctor, you were referencing in your cross-examination about a study that you were aware of about 10 years ago or so regarding MS and alcohol testing. Is that correct?
It was more on MS, looking at the results of lactic acid and LDH to see how high the levels of lactic acid can go in a group of multiple sclerosis patients. When reviewing that, we found that the range went from some normal range, 16% of the multiple sclerosis patients had normal lactic acids, but the remainder had elevated levels. But those levels were not anywhere near the required levels to produce a false positive. Our package inserts and for the Roche testing system, the Roche has it's an FDA-approved test, and they have to do in-depth, detailed testing before they allow any hospital to do a test. And they have listed, levels of lactic acid beyond which the test would not be reliable. But the results, based on this study of 600 multiple sclerosis patients, 2 big centers in Italy and 1 in the Netherlands, showed that the highest level of lactic acid in the MS patients did not achieve, didn't get close. Usually patients with MS that are asymptomatic can have normal or low normal levels, slightly elevated. It was the ones that had more symptoms that had elevated levels up to, I think the highest was 6.5 millimoles per deciliter, which is not high enough to interfere with our result.
Now, with respect to the lab at Good Samaritan Medical Center, the interference that you were speaking about earlier on cross-examination, what would happen if any of those types of interference were to occur during the course of the testing?
No, I'll allow it.
The 3 main ones, which I detailed earlier, is the hemolysis, icterus, and lipemia. Our machines are sophisticated. It will detect it and say, it will flag it and say, please do not result it, or we'll have a disclaimer saying, interpret this result with caution. The results may not be accurate. It hardly ever happens with alcohol testing. But if it did, we would get a result like that, and we probably wouldn't report it.
And from your review of the defendant's medical records, specifically her testing from January 29th, did you notice any interference or any reports like that in her record?
No.
Now, the testing that you're doing at Good Samaritan is in relation to patients such as that might have cancer or heart disease or something like that, correct?
Correct.
Now, you were talking or started to speak on cross-examination about the good quality lab results that you have from your lab, and you wanted to go into that further. Could you please expound upon that for the jury now?
We have you mentioned proficiency testing before. So all hospital laboratories accredited by the CAP or have to participate in proficiency testing. What that means is that every 3 times a year, and they give us 5 unknown samples. And we have to test it, report it back to CAP, which also reports back to the government. And we have to basically get the correct answers. And with alcohol testing, it's probably one of the best tests in the laboratory. Always have right on the money results. But at the same time, we're also able to look at results of all the other labs that participated in this proficiency testing. So we can look at different methods. We can look at labs that had the same method as us to see how we're doing. And usually with this proficiency testing, we have 3,000 labs across the nation that have the same methodology as us, so we can compare to them. And also, interestingly, we can see the labs that are using headspace gas chromatography. And out of interest, we can see, how do we compare? And we have exactly the same results on these proficiency testings. We also look at some statistics as well, not going into them, but we can look at some stats like standard deviations and SDs. And actually, the hospitals with enzymatic testing have slightly better stats with that compared to Headspace. Pretty close, but a little bit better.
And doctor, from your review of the defendant's medical records and the blood testing in this case, was that done in conformity with the policies and protocols at Good Samaritan?
We have policies in place to be followed, and there's no reason not to think that somebody didn't follow policy.
Thank you, sir.
Anything else, Ms. Little?
No questions.
All right, doctor, you are all set, sir.
Thank you. Do you have another witness, Mr. Brennan?
I do.
Okay.
The Commonwealth calls Jason Becker.
on, please.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall give to the court and the jury in the matter now pending shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Good afternoon, sir.
All right, Mr. Brennan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Jason Becker.
How old are you?
I am 36 years old.
Do you live in the area?
I do. I live in Canton.
Tell us a little bit about your education.
My education, high school and college UMass. And I went to EMT school a little over 10 years ago and paramedic school.
Tell me a little bit about EMT school. How old were you when you started EMT school?
When I started EMT school, roughly 21 years old.
Why did you decide to go to EMT school?
I wanted to save some lives.
Tell us a little bit about EMT school. What did it require?
EMT school is a couple months of classroom stuff, and then you do some ride time on the ambulance. Paramedic school is a little different. It's about a little extended, 2 years worth of training. You're doing hospital, ER time, and ambulance time also.
How long did you serve as an EMT before you went to paramedic school?
I worked as an EMT for approximately 5 years.
Can you estimate how many dozens or hundreds of calls you were on during that time?
Hundreds.
Why did you decide then to go get paramedic training?
I wanted to be on the fire department, and it was a prerequisite.
Did you complete paramedic school successfully?
I did.
Were you still working as an EMT at the time?
I was.
And inevitably, did you seek to have a different job? Did you try to be a firefighter?
I wanted to be a firefighter, correct.
Were you successful in doing that?
I was.
Tell us a little bit about that, sir.
On the Canton Fire Department. So I got on the Canton Fire Department, and then they send you to the fire academy, where you train to be a firefighter.
So you had EMT training, paramedic training, and then firefighter training.
That's correct.
On the Canton Police Department, did you serve dual roles as a paramedic and as a firefighter?
Fire department?
Yes,
Yes, sir.
department, sorry.
Yes, sir. Firefighter and as a paramedic.
You served as a firefighter and a paramedic.
Correct.
In the Canton Fire Department, does it have more than one station?
There's two.
Is there one station that's larger or smaller than the other?
Station 1 is the headquarters, which is larger.
Had you ever spent time at Station 1 as a firefighter or a paramedic?
I have. We rotate through both stations.
I want you to take us back to January 29th, 2022. Were you working that evening?
I was.
What station were you assigned to?
Canton Station 2.
Canton Fire Station 2?
Correct.
And that's the smaller of the two stations.
It is.
Were you working with anybody at Fire Station 2 that night?
My ambulance partner at the time was firefighter Dan Whitley.
Was there anybody else who was working at Fire Station 2 in addition to you and Dan Whitley?
Correct. There was an engine company with 3 guys on it.
3 people were assigned to the
The engine, correct.
Were you and Dan Whitley assigned as partners for the day, the week?
Correct. Yes, we were.
Which was it, the day or the week, sir?
The week.
So for the entire week, you're partners with a person, and does that rotate on other assignments?
It does. It rotates.
So on this particular week, you were assigned as partners with Dan Whitley.
I was.
What were your roles between the two of you?
Well, at the time, he was my preceptor. I was a new paramedic at the time. So I was more or less the lead tech on all the calls as part of my training. And Dan's been a paramedic for a long time, so he was there to teach me.
So would Dan Whitley be the lead on the call, and he would help you?
I would be the lead.
You would be the lead.
Correct.
Did you get a call that early morning hours of January 29, 2022?
We did.
What was the call assigned for?
It was a call for Section 12 psych eval.
Very briefly, can you tell us what a Section 12 is?
Sure. It's a transportation order filled out by police, doctor, basically for us on the ambulance that we have to take the patient, whether voluntarily or involuntarily, because they're a threat to themselves or someone else.
When you received the call for a Section 12, were you aware that there were other calls that Fire Station 1 had responded to that morning?
We were aware. You can hear the calls going out each station.
Were you or Dan Whitley any part of that earlier call that Fire Station 1 responded to before you got the call for the Section 12?
We were not.
So your efforts were after?
We were after, correct.
After you got the call to respond to a Section 12, did you head towards Fairview Road?
We did.
Tell us a little bit about the trip to Fairview Road.
It was a little extended because of the weather conditions at the time. Snowing heavily, windy, low visibility.
Okay. How long did it take to get from Fire Station 2 to Fairview Road?
Approximately 8 to 10 minutes.
Who drove?
Firefighter Whitley.
Now, on the way to Fairview Road, do you sit in the front of the ambulance?
We do.
Take us to when you arrived to Fairview Road. What do you see?
You see a bunch of police lights. Canton Engine 3 was already on scene, so we parked behind them.
Did you have it, without talking about what you spoke about, did you have a chance to speak to anybody at the scene?
We briefly spoke to the Canton police, and they briefed us and sent us to where the defendant was at the time.
Why do you have a conversation with other first responders at the scene before you do anything?
They're making sure the scene is safe to begin with, and they're on scene first, so they have a little more info than what our dispatch would have.
After you had that debriefing with colleagues, were you directed to approach any certain person?
I was.
Where did you go?
I went to the defendant, who was sitting in a black SUV type car.
Were there other persons inside the car with the defendant?
From my understanding, there was one person in the driver's seat.
And what seat was the defendant in?
She was in the front passenger seat.
Did you have a chance to speak to her?
I did.
And the person you spoke to who was in the passenger seat of that car, do you see that person in court today?
I do.
Could you point out and describe an article of clothing, please?
Miss Reed right there, she's in the blue, navy blue.
How long was your conversation with the defendant while she was still seated inside the vehicle?
Approximately 5 to 8 minutes.
At some point, did you and the defendant move to another location?
We did.
Where did you go?
So we went back in the ambulance.
After having a conversation with her, was she cooperative going back to the ambulance with you?
She was.
And did you ask her to be seated in the ambulance?
I did.
Was she cooperative with that as well?
She was.
After she was seated in the ambulance, did you close the doors and get in?
We did.
When you say we, who was with you?
Me and Firefighter Whitley.
So you and Firefighter Whitley were in the back of the ambulance with Miss Reed. Who was going to drive the ambulance?
Firefighter Sam Park.
Where did he come from?
He was on the fire engine that was already on scene.
I want to ask you questions now about what you did in the back of the ambulance and some of the conversations that you had. Tell us what your role is once you have a patient in the back of the ambulance. What do you do next?
Each patient's different. Depends on what the call is for. In this specific situation, it was more a psych eval, because that's what we were called for. Initial triage questions: is the patient cooperative, uncooperative, combative? I asked her name, her mental status, where she was. I asked her if she was suicidal, and if she was, did she have a plan? Did she want to hurt anyone else? Those are some of the initial triage questions that I would ask.
Why do you ask those questions?
Just to get a kind of a judgment on the patient, reading the patient.
What's your role at that point? Are you an investigator?
I'm not.
Are you in any way law enforcement?
I'm not.
So what's your focus when you're speaking to a patient?
It's basically hearing them speak in their story. In this specific situation, we didn't know circumstances. We just knew that Miss Reed had found her husband, which she was gone dead on the side of the road. So it was a traumatic call.
So when you were there, you knew nothing about what had happened before you got there?
We did not.
And your role had nothing to do with any of that investigation?
We did not.
You were solely focused on caring for the patient?
Correct.
Did you have any other role other than caring for the patient?
Just making sure she got to the hospital safely. She didn't hurt herself.
During those conversations, are you and Firefighter Whitley doing the same thing or different things?
Again, it depends on the call. I was the lead tech, so I'm the one documented, giving a report to the nurses, the staff. So I was more kind of getting that information, my initial triage questions, and then just kind of sat and supported Miss Reed. And
Were you writing down information, technical information about status and health on a report?
I was, yes.
While you were doing that, was your colleague speaking to Miss Reed?
He was.
Did you have a chance at times to hear what they were speaking about?
Yeah, and no,
At other times, did you speak directly to Miss Reed?
I have.
Can you describe her demeanor or temperament?
Initially, she was agitated because she didn't feel like she needed to go to the hospital. She said the statement she made, she didn't mean. She just kind of said it in jest because of the events that she went through. So but then there'd be periods of which she'd be calm, and then it would fluctuate. She would have like pressured speech, repetitive, but all in all, she was cooperative.
At some point, did you have a chance to speak to her directly about her mood?
About her mood?
About her mood.
I don't know if I understand the question.
Okay. Did she say anything to you about her last interaction with what she referred to as her husband?
Sustained.
Did she make any statements to you when you were giving her treatment or speaking to her about her husband?
I'll allow that, it came in.
One of the reasons why she was saying she would have stuff is because the last conversation she had with her husband at the time was an argument. I didn't feel like it was my role to really find out the details on what was said, but that's what she said to me.
That the last thing she said to him was an argument?
Yep.
Sustained.
Did she tell you what the argument was about?
She did not.
Inevitably, did you get a chance to bring her to the hospital?
We did.
Did you stay in the back of the ambulance with her?
I did.
Did you continue to have conversations with her?
Yes, I did.
Did you hear conversations or parts of conversations she was having with your colleague?
I had parts.
When you got to the hospital, what happens next?
So we brought Miss Reed into the hospital, registered her, bring her to the psychiatric section. Is it?
Okay. Thank you. I have no further questions.
Okay. Mr. Jackson?
Thank you,
I have just a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Firefighter Becker.
Good afternoon.
When you first arrived at the scene, there was at least two Canton police officers there, still.
Correct.
Do you remember their names?
Officer Saraf and Officer Mulvaney.
Okay. Their cruiser was there. You said that an engine was still there?
Correct.
And was there another ambulance there, or the other ambulance had already left the scene? They'd cleared?
They had already transported to the hospital.
Remind me, you were in ambulance 2?
Two. I was ambulance 2.
Got it. You parked behind the SUV where you ultimately made contact with Miss Reed, correct?
I think it was more in front of the SUV because the way the SUV was parked.
Got it. Got out of the ambulance, ultimately made contact with Miss Reed through the passenger door.
Correct.
Had a short conversation with her there.
I did.
You said it was maybe 5 to 8 minutes?
More like 5 minutes because of the weather conditions.
Okay, nothing of great consequence. I'm guessing just an initial, I think you called it sort of a triage assessment?
Well, it was more of just introducing myself and asking her how she was doing.
Got it. And then there was one other person in the cab of the vehicle as well.
There was.
Female, male?
Female.
So there are 2 females, one Miss Reed, one another female. Did you see any other civilian females out there?
I didn't see.
Okay,
But
so at least where you were, the contact that you had with Miss Reed and this other female, there was just two of them, not a third one.
from what I saw, correct.
Did you get the other female's name?
Not at the time, I did not.
Okay. Have you, by the way, have you since gotten her name?
Based on a conversation Firefighter Whitley and Miss Reed had back in the ambulance.
Got it. Okay. And who is that other person? That other
Miss
female?
Carrie Roberts?
Okay. When you first observed Miss Reed, did you note whether or not there was anything unusual about her physical appearance, meaning anything on her?
She did, yes.
Describe that for the jurors, please.
She had some blood around her mouth, her neck area.
At that point, were you concerned about, obviously you're concerned mainly about her safety and getting her safely to the hospital, correct?
That's correct.
Were you worried that that might be her blood?
Well, she had said that she had given CPR to her husband.
Okay, you jumped a question ahead. I was going to say, did she tell you that it was in fact not her blood?
She did, so that kind of, in a way, ruled it out.
Okay.
No injury for me.
And you didn't indicate, you didn't notice anything about her that looked like she was physically injured or physically in harm?
I did not.
Okay. She indicated that she had given CPR, mouth-to-mouth, attempts at mouth-to-mouth resuscitation to Mr. O'Keefe, correct?
She did.
And that would account for the blood on her face and in her hair and on her neck?
That's what she told me.
Okay. And based on your observations of her, you didn't have any reason to quarrel with that?
Correct.
Okay. You indicated that her tone was somewhat rapid and repetitive. Is that right?
It fluctuated, so at times it was, yes.
Did it appear to you at that time that she had gone through a pretty significant trauma, as best you were trained at the time?
Objection.
A little bit more of a foundation. I'll give it to you.
Sure. Have you ever, in your course of training, seen individuals who have gone through some sort of a traumatic event?
Frequently.
Frequently.
Everyone's different, though.
Understood. Obviously, everybody's got their own personalities and the way of dealing with those things, right?
Sure.
Have you been able to, through your training, assess whether, at least in your belief, your observations, if someone has gone through a relatively traumatic event, as opposed to just someone whistling down the sidewalk?
Yeah.
Okay. Did it appear at that time when you're interacting with Ms. Reed that she was showing the signs consistent of having gone through a trauma?
At the time, yes.
Okay. So hence the rapid speech, the repetitive speech, things of that nature?
Correct. For her. For the defendant, some people don't have rapid, repetitive
Understood.
speech.
I'm just talking about your observations of her at that time.
Yes, sir.
Her demeanor was consistent with having gone through a significant trauma.
For the situation, sure, yes.
Okay. You said that she went from calmness to agitation. The agitation you accounted for being, I don't necessarily want to go to the hospital. I don't want to be sectioned, correct?
She felt like she didn't need to. It wasn't, she wasn't going to act on her comments about wanting to harm herself.
You called it, I think in a report, it's SI, suicidal ideation?
Correct.
That's obviously of great concern to you and your partners when you're assessing a patient, correct?
That's right.
You don't want to leave someone on their own if they're going to self-harm, correct?
That's correct.
You pretty quickly assessed, I'm guessing, Firefighter Becker, that she was not, in fact, in the position to self-harm, that I think you said that the statements that she originally made, if John dies, I don't want to live, were not necessarily at the level of actual suicidal ideation. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, at the time I believed her because of the information we got and what she went through.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand your answer.
Sorry, can you repeat your question?
Of course. It's probably my fault. At the time that you assessed her, even though she had made some comments about if John doesn't live, I don't want to live either, you did not elevate that to the level of her being suicidal at that moment.
So I couldn't rule it out, but
Okay.
I didn't think it was a huge threat at the time.
Understood.
But
That's
we
what I was trying to get at.
couldn't rule it out, so that's why we had to take her to the hospital.
Understood. I mean, you had a Section 12. You had to take her irrespective of what you ruled in or out, right?
Right.
Okay. Firefighter Whitley was with you in the back of the ambulance the entire time you were with Miss Reed, correct?
Not the entire time. He was before we decided transporting. He was kind of in and out trying to find more talking to the police officers, find more of a story of, what happened,
Okay.
why we're taking the defendant on a Section 12.
Once you and Miss Reed were in the back of the ambulance, firefighter Whitley then joined you in the back of the ambulance?
He did.
How much time lapsed?
It was a couple minutes at the most.
Okay, so it wasn't a lengthy amount of time.
It wasn't lengthy.
And he was with you during the transport, along with Miss Reed, for the whole transport back to Good Sam.
It's a good, yes,
And you said on direct examination, I think your phrase was, all in all, she was cooperative with us.
for the majority of the transport, yes.
Okay. Never became combative, never got physical, nothing like that.
No,
Okay. She did refer to Mr. O'Keefe as her husband or her spouse.
that's correct.
You're aware of HIPAA rules, obviously. You're in the medical field, correct?
Correct.
You were aware at the time that HIPAA rules would demand or dictate that unless you're a spouse or a parent or a child, there are certain rules against getting or providing information to someone who isn't one of those close family members, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. You previously indicated on direct examination that, I think your words were, that Ms. Reed indicated that her last conversation she had with her husband was an argument, correct?
Correct.
You've previously testified about that statement in other particulars, right? Other hearings.
I have.
You're paraphrasing. You didn't write down what she said about her previous interactions with Mr. O'Keefe, and you didn't record those on a tape recorder, correct?
I wrote down in my report that she said she had an argument.
Right. You didn't write them down at the time. That was a bad question on my part. You weren't taking notes as she was speaking.
Yeah, it could have been. I mean, it's kind of for every call, we jot down notes on a notepad, just
Okay.
so, when we give the staff a report, we can read off it.
Do you have those notes?
I don't.
Okay. Do you think you took notes or no?
To be honest, I'm not sure. I could have been typing them on the computer. That's what we typed the report on
Okay.
at the time.
Do you have an independent recollection of taking notes, either handwritten or on a computer, as you sit here right now?
I couldn't tell you if I did one or the other. Sometimes
Okay.
I write on the computer, sometimes I don't.
Or you might not have written anything down, correct?
Correct.
Okay. So, in any event, you weren't taking down, even if you were taking notes, you weren't taking down verbatim quotes of what she was saying. You were paraphrasing the information that was coming to you, correct?
That's correct.
All right. You had previously said or testified that the last time, let me rephrase that just a little bit. You previously indicated in recounting what it was that Miss Reed actually said to you was something along the lines of she was upset because her last words to him were because of her last words to him being in anger.
I object.
I'm going to allow the question.
Is that correct?
Well, I probably phrased it a little wrongly. The last words. It was the last conversation.
Okay, that wasn't my question. My question is a simple one. In a previous hearing, did you use the phrase "her last words to him"?
Yes,
Were
I
in
did.
anger.
I did.
And that was at a hearing where you were under oath, just like you are now, correct?
Correct.
That was a little closer in time than we are now. It was maybe a year ago, correct?
Correct.
Actually, my mistake. It was about 2.5 years ago. It was a grand jury, correct?
The grand jury was before. Yes.
Okay. And the phrase that you used was, and I want to concentrate on that for just a quick second, Firefighter Becker.
Sure.
The phrase that you used at that time was that she said, quote, like her last words to him. She was upset about her, quote, last words to him. Is that right?
I object.
All right, can I see counsel at sidebar, please?
May I continue, Your Honor?
Yes.
Thank you. When you were recounting the conversation that Ms. Reed indicated that she was upset about, you also indicated, in addition to using the phrase, her last words to him, you also said that it was earlier in the night, correct? They had an argument earlier in the night.
I don't recall.
May I have just a moment, Your Honor?
Yes.
May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you don't mind, take a look at the top paragraph, very, very small print. Let me know when you've refreshed your recollection.
Yes.
Great. May I approach?
Yes.
Thank you, sir.
You got it.
When you wrote your report, you had indicated that when she was describing the argument that you testified to on direct, it was about an argument that was, quote, earlier in the night.
Earlier in the night, correct.
Okay. And then you recounted that statement, that same statement in the grand jury later on as at least including, quote, her last words. Is that right?
Her last words.
You were talking about an argument that they had, and then she was upset, and you were paraphrasing her, and one of the things that you paraphrased was, in fact, your statement was she was upset that was like her last words to him, correct?
She said that.
Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Were you also made aware, did she tell you that her last words to him were in voicemails? Did she say that?
She didn't give any details.
Did you ask her, what were your last words to him?
I did not.
Did she ever say whether or not she believed he ever received her last words to him?
There's no other details than there was no other details other than what she said.
Okay. But she did, when she was having this conversation with you about her last words to him, she did actually take out her phone and show you a bunch of missed calls to him at the same time, didn't she?
She tried to, yes.
Okay. In your mind, did you put two and two together that what she was actually talking about were the missed calls and her being upset about her last words to him, being very angry on those missed calls, those voicemails? Did you put those two things together?
I didn't.
Okay.
Um,
Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, Mr. Brennan.
So when Ms. Reed told you that she was sad because her last conversation, or her last thing that she had said to him was an argument, did she ever suggest that was in a voicemail?
Objection.
Did she ever suggest it was in a voicemail?
she did not.
Did she ever suggest that she didn't actually speak to him, but instead it was some type of message?
Objection.
I'll allow that.
Did she ever suggest that?
She did not.
In fact, you wrote a report saying that there was an argument earlier in the night, didn't you?
Objection. Your Honor.
Sustained.
You then were interviewed, weren't you? Were you
Yes.
interviewed on February 14th, 2022?
Yes.
And you referred to the fact that she told you there was an argument earlier in the night?
Argument early in the night.
Okay. And she was telling you this when you were speaking to her that morning?
Correct. Around 6 a.m. Yes.
And earlier in the night, do you know if she was referring to 12:30
I did not know.
or 12:15
No.
or midnight?
I didn't know the time.
So his answer is he doesn't know.
You testified in the grand jury, and Attorney Jackson just asked you some questions about part of the statement you made to the grand jury when he said, like her last words. Would you like to put that in context of the whole statement you made? Do you remember
Her last words.
Do you remember the entire statement that you made in the grand jury about the statement that was made to you?
I'd have to.
May I approach?
Yes.
page 81, lines 1 through 4. Please read it to yourself.
Right here, sir.
1 through 4, please.
Yes.
Now, when you made that statement you were asked about in the grand jury, you didn't just say, like her last words, did you?
No.
No. You explained your memory to the grand jury?
Objection.
Ask him what he told the grand jury.
Okay. The grand jury, do you know it was on April 21st, 2022?
Yes.
Okay. And did you tell the grand jury? So
Objection.
I'm going to see counsel at sidebar for a second, please.
May I approach?
Yes.
Sir, I'm showing you that statement that you made. That includes last words. But there's more to the statement, isn't there?
She was upset.
I'd like you to read
Oh,
your
sorry.
entire
Sure.
statement, 1 through 5. You can read it out loud.
So she was also she was upset also because she said they had, you know, the last time they had talked, she had gotten into an argument. So she was upset that that was like her last words to him.
And so when you were speaking about her last words to him, were you referring to the argument?
Correct.
You testified again regarding this issue, didn't you, in May 3rd, 2024?
Correct.
Okay. And at that point, did you think or believe that the conversation she was relating to you was about a voicemail?
Objection.
I'm going to sustain the objection.
Did you use the word again on May 3rd, 2024, argument?
Objection.
I'm going to allow this.
I used argument.
May I approach, Your Honor?
Yes.
Can I ask you to read your prior statement on page 10, lines 9 through 13?
Objection.
I'm going to see you at sidebar again and bring these documents, please. Bring all of it. Yes, I'm sorry.
Thank you. Sir, when you wrote the report of your notes to put in your report, do you remember the word argument?
I did.
Do you remember her actually saying the word argument?
I did.
Do you remember her ever saying any word about voice messages?
I did not.
You said that there was somebody in the front seat of the car with the defendant,
It was.
and you later learned from the defendant it was a person by the name of Kerry Roberts.
Correct.
Can you share with us the context? How did you learn that?
The defendant and my partner, firefighter Whitley, had a conversation.
Objection.
I'm going to allow it.
So the defendant brought up how if her husband had died at the time, she didn't know how she was going to take care of his kids.
Objection.
I'm going to allow this.
And firefighter Whitley mentioned that she had like a strong support system. You know, all the friends are on Canton, and
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Yes.
When you spoke to the defendant and she shared with you that her last words with her husband were an argument, why didn't you ask for more detail about that?
I didn't feel it was at the time we went about the call as that we didn't think we would be witnesses in a murder trial. We were there to support Karen and ultimately get her to the hospital safely.
And you were asked about trauma, and you said that you observed that the person may be in trauma, Ms. Reed.
A traumatic event,
Traumatic event.
Right.
Do you have any idea what caused that traumatic event?
I did not.
Thank you. I have no further questions.
Anything?
Very briefly, you indicated that you were asked on redirect examination by Mr. Brennan whether earlier in the night could have been 12 or 12:15 a.m., correct?
That's what he asked, yes.
And earlier in the night could have been 6 o'clock p.m.
Early in the
Friday
night, yeah, correct.
Could have been 5 o'clock p.m.
Could have been.
Could have been 7 o'clock p.m.
Sure.
Okay. You were also asked whether or not Ms. Reed actually specifically mentioned voicemails when she talked about those last words. And you said she didn't.
That I remember, correct.
But she did show you her phone.
She tried to.
And she did show you a bunch of missed calls to John O'Keefe, correct?
I wasn't going to look through her phone. I don't know who she called.
Thank you. That's it.
When she said about the argument, she said those were the last words, the argument, right?
That's correct.
Sustained.
All right. Jurors disregard that last statement. All right, you are all set.
All right. Thank you. Thank you, guys.
Is this a good place to stop for the day?
If the court pleases, yes.
Jurors, we could do 6 minutes, but I think this is probably a good place to stop. Why don't you go ahead? So, as I understand it, folks, we're on schedule, right where we thought we would be. We're going to release you for today. Now, when I told you this morning, and I've told you other times too, that when you're out in that room waiting for us, we're in here getting work done to make things more efficient for the trial, especially a trial this long. We've decided that we're going to spend Monday afternoon again trying to streamline this trial and deal with issues that we have to deal with. So Monday for you will be a half a day. All right, so I just wanted to tell you that before you left today. Please, again, those 3 cautions: do not discuss this case with anyone. Don't do any independent research or investigation into this case. If you happen to see, hear, or read anything about this case, please disregard it, let us know. And I guess the 4th caution is the same as I've been saying. Please be very careful with your social media. All right, have a good weekend. We'll see you Monday morning.
All rise for the court, please.
And I'd like to see counsel at sidebar, please.